Thank you, Lord. I wish I'd have got hold of that last one to put on the next up, we have Marilyn Duncan. Little background. I was in a poetry group with her a few years ago, and I always liked the way that she puts little quirks in her work. Now this time it wasn't a poem; it's a piece of flash fiction. But listen closely. And there's a few little kinks in there that are just worth everything. Come on.
Okay, my piece is Revelation. When Eve stepped out of the Garden of Eden that morning, she knew Adam would trail along in his own sweet time. Knowledge of sin hadn't hit him nearly as hard as it had her, even though he had been the more prolific sinner of the two, having blithely thought that he had some kind of power over her just because God created him first. He'd ribbed her mercilessly over that, and now it was up to her to decide when or if she would ever forgive him. Forgiveness, she now understood, was an outgrowth of knowledge, just as shame and guilt were. The omniscient being who had driven her from paradise didn't set a good example. One stray bite was all it took to invoke his wrath, and she had begged in vain for a second chance. As she moved forward on the bare sand that surrounded Eden, Eve realized that the first thing she needed to take care of was her exposed body. The makeshift fig leaf cover-up had begun to make all her delicate parts itch. But when she cast off the leaves, the merciless sun threatened to ravage the rest of her. She intuited rather than knew that nightfall would bring further misery. She was beginning to see the advantages of having a partner, if only to provide a shadow during the day and a belly for a pillow at night. So where on earth is Adam, she wondered, pausing to look back, foreshadowing the hapless wife of Saul, her sweat tasting of salt as it dripped from her upper lip. Her male counterpart was still on the outer fringes of garden, having refused to give up his home without a fight. It was clear he had lost the battle, bearing snake bites on his arms and legs and thrash marks on his torso. Eve, overcome with pity and protectiveness, ran the short distance to the border and reached inside to pull him toward her. As their bodies came together, she experienced a new kind of heat, and those private parts that had been numbed by the fig leaves awakened with unexpected intensity. Adam was less conscious of the advent of Eros, as he was bearing the double stings of losing his home and having her salt rubbed into his wounds. Eve took his hand and led him away from the garden entrance onto the warm sand. On the horizon, they could see a line of trees that promised at least enough cover and water to survive the night. Glancing down at the parts of Adam that were the most different from her own, Eve realized that she not only forgave him, but craved the knowledge he could provide. The taste of forbidden fruit remained on her tongue. Its luster turned to lust. Whatever pain and suffering were attached to being human, this promise of carnal connectedness would offer balm for the wounds. She squeezed his hand and smiled for the first time.